Agatha All Along just released with a 2-episode premiere in a similar format to every other MCU TV show. Unlike the majority of the fanbase, I actually watched these 2 episodes and decided it deserved its own video. If you don't care to watch this show, but you do want to know if it's good or not, you're in the right place. Agatha is set directly after WandaVision and starts off in the same format. It takes place in Wanda's very own town, Westview, where Agatha is still trapped under her spell 3 years later. Starting off as a trashy cop show with purposefully bad acting and annoying cliches, the story is very easy to follow as long as you've seen WandaVision. We're introduced to 3 main characters right off the bat: Agatha, Rio, and Teen. Agatha is already well known for being the antagonist of WandaVision, who is essentially a notorious witch that uses dark magic. Rio, at the beginning, just seems like someone from Secret Services, but is later revealed to be her arch nemesis. Teen is just a stereotypical over-the-top annoying kid who has a weird obsession with the main character for no reason at all. Quickly, you can sense that something is very wrong with the show. Agatha is investigating a murder, and it's later revealed that the victim is actually Wanda, or a version of Wanda that's inside Agatha's head. One thing that really annoyed me about this scene though is how her face was purposely covered in multiple scenes. Like, her body was in 2 scenes and her face was covered in both of them. Like, this is a big Marvel problem. Being able to see Elizabeth Olsen's face on that body, even if it was just for a few seconds, would actually add so much. Instead, it's like, okay, they're not going to show her face and we know she's there, but it feels so much more shallow because you can't actually see her. Maybe they couldn't afford her, or maybe there were scheduling conflicts. I don't know. At the end of the day, the lack of crossovers between Marvel shows is just, it's a big problem. Anyway, there's a whole reveal and fight scene, and we get to the conclusion of the first episode, which ends with Agatha being warned about a group of witches that want to stop her called the Salem 7. Also, Teen wants to become all-powerful like Agatha, so he's trying to get her to take him to some place called The Road.
What were you after?
The road.
What road?
Now, I have a lot to say about this road thing because it actually gets a little annoying. The entire second episode is oriented around the road, and it's some extremely mysterious cliche that will give you whatever you want the most. I think out of everything that bothered me about the show, the concept of the road was the most annoying part. Yes, it's an unoriginal cliche that they have to go on a quest to find what they want the most, but that wasn't the big issue. The entire episode was built up around the concept of the road, and it felt one-dimensionally pushed into a mediocre plot that had barely anything entertaining to offer. Agatha went around collecting witches for her quest to go on the road, and she recruited 4 other people, one of them being her neighbor from WandaVision. The second episode ended with her collection of people going into the entrance of the road and the Salem 7 right behind them. One thing I will say though, at the end of episode 2, there was a song that the witches were singing, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Down, down the road, down the witch's road.
That's one of those really unique things about this show that separates itself from other MCU projects. Agatha is known for using music in her witchery, and it's a cool little detail that you have to sing a song to open the gates. I don't know, I just thought that part was actually pretty cool, and it sounded pretty good too. Now that I've given a brief plot summary of the show, let's talk about the actual quality of it. It's no secret that MCU TV shows have dipped in quality recently, and while the show starts off better than some, it's not necessarily good. There's already a lot of controversy on the internet regarding the show, and if it's any better than shows like WandaVision or Miss Marvel. And the truth is, it doesn't really matter. While it's unfortunate, the fact of the matter is that almost no one is watching this show. There's virtually no hype. There's barely any mention of it on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. I mean, when MCU TV shows used to come out, there was an insane amount of hype for each one. My entire feed would just revolve around these TV shows, and every time a new episode released, people would constantly be raving about how exciting it is. The most common thing I've seen about this new Agatha show is, wait, I didn't know this show had released yet. Probably because everyone thought it would start on Halloween and not end there. At the core, the issue with this show isn't its lack of quality. It's simply the fact that people just don't care anymore. Marvel's biggest mistake is thinking that they can put out whatever they want and fans are going to watch it because of the brand of the company that it's under. That might have been the case right after Endgame, but things have wildly changed since then. Simply being a Marvel show isn't enough anymore. People have lost faith. Oh, that being said, there's still a lot to be said about the show itself and if it's actually worth watching. The truth about Agatha is that it's simply mediocre. There's some good scenes like the first fight scene between Agatha and Rio, and then there's some really bad ones like when Agatha is literally walking around Westview naked. And for some reason, none of that is blurred out, by the way. Agatha as a character is just unlikable, but sometimes she can actually be funny. Rio seems like a generic antagonist who has a feud with the main character, and Teen is incredibly annoying, and the only reason he's in the show is to counter Agatha's cruel personality and make her relatively more likable. Overall, the characters are just very cliche. The story is also very cliche. The acting is alright, and the CGI is decent. Everything about this show is just so average. It's just there, taking up space in a Disney Plus box that could have been something else. Every time I think about this show, all I think is that we could have had something a million times times better, something fans actually wanted to see. And that's honestly personally my biggest gripe with this show. It's simply the fact that no one wanted to see it and no one really cares. Every side character and dual antagonist doesn't need to have their own show. And Kevin Feige did admittedly do a good job of owning up to his mistakes and saying he slowed the roll on projects, but greenlighting this one was a mistake. Even if the show stays decent throughout, even if it gets a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, which it won't, it doesn't really matter because the show has already flopped in terms of fan success and audience excitement. The fact of the matter is that 9 times out of 10, the most popular episode of a TV show is generally the first episode, especially with the limited series, and if no one's talking about the first episode, no one's gonna talk about the rest of the show. To be honest, Agatha just feels a little shallow even from the first 2 episodes, like something is missing, and I think the reason for that is because Agatha doesn't really feel like a main character. It feels like there's no main character in this show. What I will say though is there are a few pretty interesting scenes, like for example, whenever Teen talks about his real name or gives any information from his past, Agatha can't hear it. Interesting enough, Teen doesn't seem to be aware of this either.
Who are you?
My name is...
Say again.
I'm...
Now, there's one big thing that bothered me about this show, and it's not just an issue with the show itself, but the marketing of the show as well. This has been one of my gripes with Disney for a long time, but it's getting worse than ever now. This show is unironically advertised as the quote, gayest Disney show to date. I want to preface this before getting too far into it. There's nothing wrong with inclusion. There's nothing wrong with diversity. My issue with this is the fact that the inclusion is being shoved into my face. The truth about this kind of inclusion is that it doesn't actually do anything good for minorities, and if anything, it actually just pushes people away from wanting to be inclusive as a whole. When I watch a good TV show, I don't go out of my way to look for some black or Asian or gay dude. Those characters are implemented into the show and you can see the diversity through certain subtleties and mannerisms when they're relevant or important. Good TV shows don't have to scream at me trying to show me that there's a gay character on the screen every 4 seconds. Real inclusion and diversity is when you can acknowledge a character without making it an entire plot point or advertise the entire show around it. I guarantee you the forced woke culture of Disney in the last 5 years has probably made more people homophobic on the internet than before. And the truth is that Disney doesn't actually care about inclusion or diversity. They do it for PR points. Disney is a corporation, same as any. If they cared about people, they wouldn't overwork and underpay their workers. Instead, they force characters to be gay and then shove it in my face, and if I don't like it, all of a sudden I'm misogynistic or homophobic. Instead of writing annoying characters that are conveniently gay as one of their central character traits, write good characters that just happen to be gay as well. It doesn't need to be a massive conversation. There's one scene in particular that really bothered me in Agatha episode 2 when Teen's boyfriend FaceTime called him. This entire scene was literally just a four-stop inclusivity scene that had absolutely nothing to add to the conversation. Also, the way Teen is dressed up, it feels like the directors of the show literally put what does an emo gay dude look like into ChatGPT and then copy pasted that onto Joe Locke. Like, this guy is the full package. Dark hair, dark eyeliner, makeup, painted nails, jewelry. It's just an annoying stereotype, and I think it's just a little silly how one-dimensional this character feels. Alternatively, the chemistry between Agatha and Rhea in the first episode was far more subtle and well handled. It also seems like an actually relevant plot point because it seems like their chemistry with each other has more of a history and will have more importance going forward. With just the first 2 episodes out, I do have a lot to say about this show, and to be completely honest, it's not that bad. There's definitely a lot of positives and negatives already, and I wouldn't really be surprised if this show fails to stick the landing based off of the finales of WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Secret Invasion, Miss Marvel, and She-Hulk, but it's something that I'm going to continue watching because I do believe it was entertaining and there is an interesting premise to it. It does feel somewhat different from generic Marvel content, it just doesn't really do its cliches justice.